Right, we might give it maybe 2 minutes for everyone to join. Got lots of people joining. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Maybe just 1 more minute and then we'll get started. Okay. All right, let's kick it off. Hi, everyone. So my name's Laura Spalding. I head up our strategic sourcing team at PERSUIT, and my role is to work with our clients and their in-house lawyers to essentially scope out their matters, come up with innovative pricing arrangements, and make better engagement decisions for their work. So just a little bit about my background. As you can probably tell, if you don't know me, I am Australian. I started my career as a corporate and commercial lawyer in Australia, and I probably practiced for about 5 or 6 years before I came to my senses and realized that it wasn't for me. I've always been quite entrepreneurial and probably more obsessed with the business of law and legal services, which is how I eventually found myself in New York and working in legal pricing at PERSUIT. So Maui and I are both massive legal pricing nerds. It's all we like to geek out on all day long. I'll introduce you to Maui in a moment. But if you haven't joined one of our AFA sessions before, this is our AFAs 101 webinar. So I'll go through the agenda in a moment. This is a special one because Maui's just joined us here at PERSUIT, and he was formerly a senior financial analyst at a very big law firm. So I haven't done this AFAs 101 session before with the, I guess, law firm lens, a really fresh law firm lens on these pricing arrangements and how they really work in practice from the law firm view. So I'm excited to have him join me today. Maui, I might just get you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, of course. Hello, everyone. I'm Maui Guevara. So at PERSUIT, I'm a senior manager of legal pricing innovation. I have the same broad coverage that Laura has in assisting our clients and providing a little bit of that subject matter expertise in terms of structuring your RFPs to really get the most value out of the engagements that you're having with your firms. So as Laura also mentioned, I was previously at Latham & Watkins, where I was a senior financial analyst. So there I was involved with a lot of responding to these AFAs and these RFP requests that we would get from our client. I was also involved in structuring the panel and rate arrangements there too. So excited to provide a little bit of that perspective here in this presentation.
Thanks, Maui. All right, let's
of course.
jump over to the agenda for today. All right, so as I said, this is part one in a series of AFA webinars that we run frequently. So if you haven't joined this one before, it's pretty high level. I think I'm always surprised how much engagement this first session gets, because I feel like we really just cover the basics of AFAs, the pros and cons of each. To me, AFAs aren't that new. We've been talking about them for many, many years, but it does always help to go back to basics, especially if you're just getting started. So we have legal ops professionals joining today. We have lawyers, in-house and external. So we're going to cover firstly an introduction to alternative fee arrangements. So the why behind shifting from hourly rates to AFAs. What are the AFA types and their pros and cons? So we're really going to go into each of the most common alternative fee arrangements, as well as the more traditional hourly billing arrangements that are a little more cost predictable. And then I thought we'd also cover today the two most common questions that we get when we're talking about AFAs, and that is how to deal with changes in scope and how to know you're getting a good AFA. So I think a lot of that content we'll be able to cover in 20 or 30 minutes, and then I wanted to leave a lot of time at the end for Q&A. So we're pretty flexible on the questions. I would encourage you to drop those in the Q&A, or if you have access to the chat, we can also keep an eye on that. So we might pause throughout and answer questions as we go, but if we're getting a lot of them, we might just hold off until the end and go through them. But please do feel free to ask questions as we go. And if you want us to elaborate on something or do a deeper dive on a particular AFA, we're happy to do that. Okay, so just before we get started, this session will be recorded. We'll send you a email afterwards with some more details, some more resources, and information about the next webinar that follows on from this. All right, so why move away from hourly billing? The number one question. So I think we're all pretty familiar with the inefficiencies of hourly billing. There are many reasons why we should move away from hourly billing, but these are the three biggest reasons, or the ones that probably resonate with you the most. So just to touch on these, obviously the hourly billing model drives poor incentives, and it usually has a high risk of overcompensation. So we know our law firms get paid a lot. They have a lot of flexibility when they're providing you with hourly rates and budget estimates, and they're not encouraged or incentivized to stay within budget. So there's usually the argument you hear that you want to make sure that you're getting quality services from your law firm. So you'll pay them their hourly rates because you don't want them to skimp on the outcomes. But at the end of the day, quality is table stakes, and your firms and your law firm partners should be focused on delivering your outcomes rather than focusing on the effort that they're providing. So we want to get you away from paying for effort and start having you pay for the value that you're actually getting from your law firms. So number two, hourly billing gives you no cost predictability. So our legal ops friends will probably relate to this the most. It's very difficult to budget in legal. It's very difficult to know what something should cost. Hourly rates are purely based on the time it takes an individual lawyer to perform a task. And there really is no market consensus on how long something should take, how long is a piece of string. It's very difficult to determine if you're getting a good rate or a good bill at the end of a matter. So we really want to move away from hourly billing so that we can start to maintain not just cost predictability, but a little more control over our spend.
Yeah, and then just segueing into reason number three, the billable way is a miserable way to work. I mean, ultimately, there's just a lot of inefficiencies and things that are prohibitive to the relationship that you want to build with your law firms with the hourly billing. So we're really wanting to reward the law firms and kind of pay for performance. And like Laura had said, incentivize them to give us the value and the outcomes of the work. So hourly billing, I'm sure as you all are familiar, there's a lot of things that go along with it, such as invoice reviews. Now you're going down to the itemized, hour by hour, person by person. You have to do annual rate negotiations with your law firms, which can become very contentious, as you may know. And then these negotiations just take time away from the work that you should be doing. And instead, you're focusing on each of the hourly bills that you're doing for the timekeepers that are doing your work.
Yeah, I'm sure we can all relate. If you've practiced it sometime, the stress and laying awake at night wondering if you build enough hours for that day to meet the requirements for a bonus at the end of the quarter. So if you're inherently tying lawyer performance and career progression to the time that they're billing, then that is not going to be a positive outcome for the clients. Okay, so let's go forward, Maui, to transitioning away from time-based billing to AFAs. So we've talked a little bit about the problems with hourly billing. So if you're here and you're in this webinar, it's because you either agree or you want to be kind of hear the argument against hourly billing and towards AFAs. If you're ready to start moving towards AFAs, which most of our clients are, there are some challenges to overcome. And I want to let Maui speak to some of those challenges because a lot of them are around the law firm view on AFAs and some misconceptions or many misconceptions around how law firms deal with and what their approach is to billing alternative fee arrangements. But the benefits kind of speak for themselves. So obviously we're rewarding efficiency, we're giving you cost predictability. Having an AFA and negotiating an AFA actually gives you an opportunity to have a conversation with your external lawyer about what your expectations are for a matter. So it almost forces you to align on your desired outcomes, align on the value and the quality that you expect, because you need to provide those firms with a lot of assumptions and really clear instructions about the scope of work for them to be able to provide you with an alternative fee arrangement. So that's kind of a happy consequence of working with alternative fee arrangements. Then you've got the benefits in the billing piece. So I had a lawyer say to me recently that they'd just done a fixed fee by phase on a pretty complex litigation. And they said, this is going to give me back my Sundays because I usually spend my Sundays poring over timesheets of my external counsel, going through all of the time that they billed and scrutinizing their invoices. So taking that out of the equation is good for all parties involved. Firms can still profit from alternative fee arrangements, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And then your fees tend to decrease year over year. So with your rates, as you know, you're going to get a letter from your firm each year saying, hi, we've increased our rates 10%, 15%. So with alternative fee arrangements, usually that arrangement is based on one specific scope of work and not sort of an annual hourly rate across all work. So I'll hand over to you, Maui, for the challenges that we may need to overcome or the obstacles in achieving these benefits.
Yeah, and of course, as Laura had mentioned, one of the key things, and I guess the most important thing when you are considering AFAs and transitioning away from hourly, is that there is a lot of upfront setup that has to happen for these arrangements to be successful. So ultimately, you want these AFAs to work for you and you want to be successful in getting that value and getting that relationship established with your law firms. So ahead of the engagement itself, you have to understand or have an understanding of the scope of work that you're trying to cover and be very clear about that to your law firm. So we're going to walk through again these different types of AFAs and kind of the different things that you have to be able to gauge before you reach that level of AFA. Additionally, from the law firm perspective and internally, you have to change your philosophy or how you actually look at the billing itself. So traditionally, Billing for law firms has been unitized at an individual level. So you're looking at rates for an associate or a partner or a counsel. And an AFA structure, you want to pay for the value of the work. So the unit is no longer those individual people, but the work itself. So your invoices are going to start to change. And instead of paying for that hourly rate, you're going to start looking at paying for activities or tasks or phases or matter level things or portfolio level things that the law firms are actually providing you. And then vice versa, not just internally as a client, the firms are going to have to adjust the way they operate and think about their profitability, how efficient they are with their working, the leverage that they're using for the matters that they're doing for you. And that's because they have to adjust to the new concept of how the AFA is actually driving their own internal financials and numbers. And then lastly, hourly rates are just familiar. It's very easy. It's very simple. It's always been here. It's established. It's kind of the foundation of this industry that we're trying to step away from. So it's something that everyone is familiar to, and it doesn't require a lot of adjustment to just provide a discount year over year. But with an AFA structure, this does require an additional level of partnership and just engagement so that you manage successfully the changes that are happening that we just previously mentioned.
Thanks, Melanie. Okay, so I guess the first question is, where do I start? So clients come to us all the time with an objective to increase a significant amount of spend under AFAs. So to give you an example, in PERSUIT, the data is that 80% of the RFPs that are sent out on the platform are under an alternative fee arrangement. And I think that compares with something like 18 or 19% in the market. So we are huge proponents of alternative fee arrangements, but we're not going to kind of throw you in the deep end straight away. A lot of our clients come to us and say, look, I'm really comfortable with hourly rates. I've been negotiating these rates with my firm partners for many years, and I know I'm getting the best possible or the cheapest rate for my firm partners and associates. But what can I do to perhaps innovate my hourly billing models so that I can take a bit of that control back and get a little more cost predictability? So there is a way. And so this is kind of our scale of innovation. So starting with efficiency controlled hourly billing is a good place, especially if you're legal ops and you want to encourage your lawyers to kind of try something different, but not really ready to move them all the way over to fixed fees or value-based billing. So that's capped and collared fees. So many of you will probably be familiar with a capped fee. We'll talk about that in more detail in a moment, as well as a collared fee. So these are models that are still time-based. They still require timesheets, and they're still driven by hourly rates. But you're controlling them to some extent and providing some incentive for the firms to think about their spend and maintain a particular budget. Then we jump into fixed fees. So fixed fees, what most people think of when they think of alternative fee arrangements. There are actually a number of different types of fixed fees, and then tools that go with those fixed fees to make them more appropriate for a specific type of work. So fixed fees are probably the most common type of alternative fee arrangement, but again, there's many, many misconceptions about the limitations of a fixed fee. And then if you want to be truly innovative, and what we're seeing the most innovative legal corporate departments doing and law firms doing is starting to move on to a purely value-based billing model. So what value am I actually getting for this work? So it works well in things like M&A transactions where you've got a significant deal value, and the value of the work that you're getting from your law firms, you're probably willing to pay more for it. And so these are the types of billing models that really just make sure that you're paying for value. And then some of the models in here, like a success and a contingency fee, are really good value approaches that you can add to a more traditional billing model. So you could add a success or a contingency fee to an hourly billing model or a fixed fee billing model to make it, to incentivize your firms more to reach a specific outcome or provide you with a specific value. So now we're going to jump into each of the different types of AFAs specifically and their pros and cons. I'm just going to take one moment just to check because I'm seeing a few questions come in. Okay, these are some good questions, but questions we'll probably cover during the webinar, so I might hold off on answering these until we get closer to the end. So Maui, take it away on the capped fee.
Yeah, of course, the infamous capped fee. So this one is probably the one where law firms dread when they see the capped fee arrangement. So of course, we're going to go over the pros and cons of the capped fee and kind of explain how it works. But I'm sure many of you guys are already familiar with this. So again, the whole idea is to provide a ring fence around our hourly billing. So additional incentives to make sure that the firms are providing efficiency in the work that they're doing. But the big downside of a capped fee, so really what a capped fee is you operate and accrue fees at whatever hourly agreement you have with your law firms, but then at a certain cap, the firm is then taking on all of the risk, and you as a client are no longer paying anything above that capped amount. So we have a little graphic there on the right-hand side where you can see we have a cap at $100,000. So if they exceed $100,000 of fees, then you're only really paying for that $100,000. So of course, obvious cons in this one is that the costs are contained and you do get a little bit of predictability in terms of saying, at maximum, you're only going to be paying for that $100,000. This can also be very effective in some ways if you know that the cap fee they're providing you is a good cap fee. So that kind of segues into the cons, right? Because the firms are assuming a majority of the risk, if not all of the risk in a cap fee engagement, they have to do some risk mitigation when they set up these cap fee engagements with their clients. So from a law firm perspective, we're not going to want to set that cap at a low amount. We're going to want to set that cap at a stretch amount, even above what we would probably estimate this matter to be, because we want to mitigate that overage risk as a firm. So when you do see these capped engagements from your law firms, you're going to tend to get a higher cap than they would normally provide you if they were just giving you an estimate or a fixed fee, which we will talk about later. And like we previously mentioned, and Laura had previously mentioned, this still ties back to your hourly rates. So at the end of the day, you're still having to negotiate those hourly rates. You're still having to rely on those hourly rates. You might even still have to do invoice reviews and negotiations beneath the cap. So you're probably going to have to still look at, those individual line items and nitpick and argue, and it's still tying you to all of the downsides that comes with hourly billing. And then also, additionally, from a firm perspective, there's actually a perverse incentive for law firms to hit the cap, because from their perspective, they're getting as good as the rate discount that they're giving you on their hourly rates. So let's say law firm A is giving you a 20% discount. They're always getting that 20% discount all the way up to the cap. So for them, it actually makes sense to just economically hit the cap or get as close to the cap as possible, but still stay under it, and their discount doesn't change. It's the same from an economic perspective for that law firm. So there's some different incentives that really come with a cap fee that you're not going to want as a law firm with your law firm relationships. So let's move on. And this is just an example of how that cap can work. This example actually shows you some ways to mitigate a little bit of that risk of the firms hitting that overall larger cap. And you do it by splitting it by work and by phases. So this is split up by work product here. You'll see expert discovery. We have different sub items that you're seeing that is being handled on the PERSUIT platform. So we're saying, there's not just an overall cap, but there's individualized cap at each of these different work products. And that mitigates a little bit of that overarching risk that comes with just doing all the work and then hitting that cap up front. And then now the firms are no longer incentivized to work as efficiently or work as hard because they're now overing the cap and all the risk is on them. So this is just a quick example of that. And I don't know if Laura had anything to add before I move on to the next one.
No, I was just going to say that some of the cons you've outlined there, Maui, are very true, but we do have some tools or recommendations that you can add to these types of fee arrangements to mitigate some of those. So asking for budget breakdowns for each of the key cost driving activities within the phase is a good one. And then you can also build in provisions to your AFA proposal or your agreement that deal with significant changes of scope so that your firm is not taking on so much risk.
Yeah. So the next version of this is kind of a step above, and this is a collar fee with a risk sharing arrangement. So here, what you're really doing is you're splitting the risk a little bit that we were talking about previously, that was traditionally just on the law firm side. So what you do is you set a fixed amount, a fixed target, or fixed target, and then around that you'll set a collar. Normally this is a percentage or dollar collar. Let's say here in the example to the right, it's a plus or minus 10% of that $100,000. So what you do as a client in a firm is that you share the efficiency, or you share the risk of the overage above that cap. So let's say you come underneath the cap, you would agree to a certain percentage share of the savings that you're realizing as a client. So if you say you come $10,000 underneath the $100,000 cap, that's a 10% savings on you. Maybe the firm will ask for 50% of that back as a reward for their efficiency, or as a bonus for their efficiency. And then if you go over that cap amount or that collar amount, then you would also share in that risk and the firm would say, like, okay, we will increase your discount up above that certain point, or we'll only take a smaller amount of fees up above that certain point. So what this does is a little bit more flexible than the fee cap. So the pros here is it really incentivizes the firms to come under that collared fee. They're no longer having that incentive to kind of hit that target amount, because they're also sharing in the efficiency gains and the savings that you're getting as a client. And if the firms exceed that cap, the firm still gets paid something in the excess, so they're still incentivized to work beyond that. So the cons here, again, it just ties back to the hourly billing, the reviews of the invoices, and everything that comes along with the hourly billing. And the efficiency and the effectiveness is really just within that collar range that you're setting. So beyond that collar range, the discount can outweigh the actual value for a firm. The discount can outweigh the actual value of the work itself, or beneath that collar, the efficiencies aren't really being realized by the firm as well. So at the bottom there, you've kind of just given a quick example of how this can work. And again, this is a split between the firm and the client themselves, where a plus or minus $10,000 cap, if they finish under, they get a portion of the savings, and if they finish above, they get a discount on additional billings above that collar. So now we're going to move into the next type of family of AFAs, and I'm going to move it to Laura.
Thanks, Maui. Okay, so moving into the fixed fee family. So we're all pretty familiar with fixed fees. So starting with the most simple fixed fee, it's just the matter level fixed fee. So it's a total cost for a specific scope of work. So for example, you've got a commercial advice project, maybe you're asking for a privacy matrix or a review of your internal documents. You know exactly how much work is required, you know exactly what you're asking for, and that's unlikely to change. And so that usually lends itself really well to a matter fixed fee. That's not to say that you can't build some flexibility in there. I won't go into that into too much detail on this session, but this is just the most simple of your fixed fees. So obviously this completely takes hourly billing out of the equation, and you're just paying for those core deliverables. So if it's one deliverable or 3 or 4, then you can just ask for a fixed fee and have that cost predictability. So I'll move on now to an example of what that would actually look like in the context of a 50-state privacy matrix. So the scope of work is really clear, the trajectory is unlikely to change. So you can go out to your firms, and if you're giving them the same set of assumptions and the same very detailed scope of work, this is what I'm asking for, usually you can get really nice comparable apples to apples proposals back from each firm. And it's really easy to make a selection decision from there. So this is just an example of what that would look like. Okay, moving on to a phase-based fixed fee. So this is still a fixed fee, but now we're dealing with matters that perhaps are a little more complex or a little more phase-based. Let's say litigation, for example. So I know we had a question come in earlier, what AFAs lend themselves to different matter types. There is often a misconception that fixed fees don't work for things like complex litigation. Our most common use case at PERSUIT is actually patent litigation, some of the most complex type of litigation. And we see up to 80% of those types of matters under a phase-based fixed fee. So obviously there's a little more to it than just getting a fixed fee by phase, but just to explain that a little bit, you're asking your firms to still provide you with a total fixed fee for the whole scope of work, but you're not asking them to bill you just for that matter. You want them to bill you on completion of each phase. So you're asking also for a fixed fee by phase. In some cases, you want to break that out by the key cost driving activities within there. So Maui, if I get you to move forward just on one slide to show what that looks like. So you're asking for a fixed fee by phase, you want to be billed at the phase level, and you want that fee to remain fixed, but you can ask the firms to go even more granular with their pricing on something that's a really complex litigation. So give me a fixed fee for initial case assessment, but then break it out by the things that I've identified as the key cost driving activities. Obviously, there's more than these 5 or 6 key cost driving activities within each of these phases that goes into the work that the lawyer is providing on that matter, but I'm just keeping it to the things that are really material to cost. I'm just limiting it to those key items or the key outcomes. And I don't expect them to bill me at this task level. I still want them to bill me at the phase, but by getting a breakdown, I'm getting more transparency into where that cost sits, so that if there is a change in scope, that's going to give me the foundation to have a discussion with my firm about how much we should change the fee by. So I'm going to go into that a little bit more at the end of some of these fee arrangements, but that's the phase-based fixed fee. So moving on to the portfolio fixed fee. So we see a lot of portfolio work coming in for things that are really high volume, repetitive matters, but tend to be low in value. So because they're low in value and they're pretty predictable individually, you don't want to be in a situation where you're going out to a firm on a matter by matter basis and trying to negotiate an alternative fee arrangement. So to give you an example, I'm talking about things like patent agency work, trademark filings, immigration filings, a lot of corporate governance or corporate entity management work. Some loan document work is common for our banking clients. So it's the work that you need your external firms to do, but you're looking at maybe $1,000 or $2,000 per matter, and often even less. So what you want to do is have one firm or a panel of firms, but I'd recommend in most cases one firm to award an entire annual portfolio of work to. And so what that means is if you can give that firm some assumptions about how much volume to expect and what types of fees to expect on an annual basis, say for example for corporate entity management, then they can usually give you an annual fixed fee to handle that portfolio of work. So obviously there are some matters where there are hiccups or obstacles and the matter blows out, but there are also some matters that are easier than others and they might save on those. So depending on the value of the portfolio, depending on the predictability in the volume per annum, some portfolios of high volume work really lend themselves well to a portfolio fixed fee. And so here's an example of e-discovery portfolios. So we go out to our e-discovery vendors and we say, give me a portfolio fixed fee to handle my whole e-discovery portfolio. And so sometimes you don't know if you want to give all of that work to one firm, and that can be because you don't know if they have capacity to handle it. Maybe the work is very regional specific. You might want a provider in the EU, one in the US, one in APAC. And so in this example, we've said to the firms, because we want to take advantage of volume discounts. So if I'm giving you a multi-million-dollar annual portfolio, I'm expecting some discount for that guarantee of volume. But if I'm not sure, I can say, well, what would the cost be if I gave you 60% of the portfolio? What would the cost be if I gave you 100% of the portfolio? So that's a good way to negotiate a really good AFA for this type of portfolio arrangement. Okay, and then speaking of portfolios, sometimes you have repetitive task-based work. Again, you don't want to go out to counsel for every single engagement or do an RFP process or anything like that every time something like this comes in the door, but you have no idea how much volume there's going to be for this portfolio. All you know is here is a list of services that I know I'll probably need over the course of the next 2 years. Maybe I don't know which firm I want to use, but I want to get a menu of prices from my firms that are locked in for the year. So immigration work is a good one. So the cost for handling and processing visas and applications, and so getting a menu of those services and a fixed fee associated with each means that when that matter comes across your desk, you already know what the firms are going to charge you, and it's just like ordering something off a menu. That's an example of a line item or task-based fixed fee. You can still take advantage of volume discounts in a scenario like that, but you would just ask for those to be retroactively applied based on the volume you've given them after a period of time. And yes, we will be sharing this deck in a follow-up email at the end. Okay, so that's our fixed fees. I'm going to hand it over to Maui to cover a couple of value-based fees now.
Yeah, so now we are moving towards the opposite end of the spectrum from the things that are tied towards hourly, and these are the value-based fee families. So really the focus here in this section is to pay for the outcome, the achievements, the successes that are being realized by these firms and work that's being done for the clients, you as the clients. So the first one that we're going to go over is a success bonus. So this one really, really works well in the context of a matter or a activity where success can be defined. So a predefined outcome or achievement, a milestone or a marker that a firm can hit or target, and then you reward them with that with a success bonus. So this really motivates firms to get that optimal result for their clients. And normally how we try to structure these is that we tie them to a high discount or a reduced upfront fixed fee so that the risk again is shared. So in the event of an adverse outcome, the firm, gets the client still gets a good result in terms of the fees that they're going to be paying. And it also incentivizes and aligns the incentives of the client and the firm to get that successful outcome. So a big key aspect of this really is to understand and define what that success component is. And there's an example there to the right of an arbitration where the phases are defined in fixed fees, but towards the end on a successful outcome, you get a bonus where you get a portion of the fees or a portion of the reward amount that comes at the end of this. So another good example of this is a motion to dismiss. So a lot of firms will structure their motion to dismiss, or a lot of clients will structure their motion to dismiss at a fixed fee basis. And then on a successful outcome, they'll pay a success bonus because you're avoiding the larger spend that can happen later on in the litigation. So that could be the discovery or the trial even. So those are millions of dollars you're potentially avoiding for your firm to get that ideal result right there at the motion to dismiss. So you want to share a little bit of that success and a little bit of the savings that you're ultimately getting with your firms. So this one here is really tied to kind of that incentivized target, that incentivized success component that you're looking at and understanding with your firms and agreeing to with your firms. And then the last example that we're going to be going over is the contingency fee. So this one is a direct tie to a amount or recoverable value at the end of the day. So this can either be for a transactional work or a litigation work lends itself really well to this type of arrangement, where the firm will charge a set percentage of a certain amount recovered at the end. So this can be an award in a civil litigation or a trial litigation, or this could be the deal value of a huge transactional deal. So you only pay for a successful outcome here. This is kind of all skin in the game for the firm. The firm really is putting a lot of their resources and thought into investing in things like this. So from a firm perspective, I'll just let you know, for example, at Latham, when we entered into litigation contingencies, we viewed it as an investment. So it was really an investment in the abilities of our lawyers, of our partners, of our associates and counsel, and their strategy and understanding of this to be confident enough to invest alongside the client, their time, their effort, the foregone fees, to get a percentage of that share at the end of the day for the recoveries. So here you're moving completely away from hourly billing because you're not even tracking it, you're not looking at it. All you're doing is accruing the fees internally and then really just weighing that value against that percentage share recovery at the end of the day. So for a client, the huge advantage of this is that you really can take on great cases or great matters or great opportunities that otherwise you wouldn't be able to take because it's cost prohibitive for you. So you might be able to tap into some more sophisticated, some more expertise, talent with a contingency fee structure like this. Now, the cons of this, of course, is that if firms and clients aren't completely understanding the dynamics of the fee accruals and the percentage of the amount that you're sharing with your firms, it can end up in lopsided kind of arrangements where the fee percentage that the firms are asking for becomes a significant component of the recovery and the award, or vice versa, where the firms are just accruing fees and burning through amounts of work that no longer is tied to or equal the percentage that they would probably get at the end from the recovery amount. So it's always good, from a firm perspective, when we see a client propose a contingency fee or we see an opportunity for a contingency fee, a lot of the work really happens in balancing out and understanding the scope of work, the amount of kind of strategy and thought that goes behind as to how successful can this be for us and for the client, and how can we make this work.
Thanks, Maui. So there are some good questions coming in that we did anticipate, hence these next two slides. So the first common question is, how do you address changes in scope without deferring back to hourly rates? So the number one objection that I hear probably at least twice a week is, how am I supposed to use a fixed fee if I have no idea what's going to happen in this case? I really have no idea what the trajectory is. What if it settles? What if it doesn't? It goes to trial. How am I supposed to lock my firms into a fixed fee? Or how can they give me a fair fixed fee if the scope of work is so ambiguous? So the answer is requires a little bit of work up front in the engagement, but it's certainly worth it. So what we say is, and this is a litigation example, but the same goes for most other types of complex work, is usually in your phase-based work, Within those phases, you can identify the 4 or 5 key cost driving activities. So these sometimes are the same things that take the most time, for example, but those are the things that are really material to cost. So with or without them would have a high impact on the cost and the outcome. So as an example here, we've got witness statements, the expert witnesses that are involved, the motions that need to be filed, the document review. Those are the things that tend to drive cost the most in litigation. So once you've identified those, limit them to the things that are material. So again, I don't care about how many faxes you need to send. I don't care about how many times I need to pick up the phone and talk to you, or how long it's going to take you to drive to the courthouse. I only care about the things in the context of a $2 million litigation. I care about the things that are material only to cost. And so after I limit them, all I need to do is provide an assumed quantity. And I know what you're thinking, but you just said I didn't need to predict what's going to happen with the matter. You don't, but based on your experience with these types of matters, you should be able to provide a reasonable guess or a likelihood of how many of these key cost driving activities will be required. And if you can't, just take a guess. As a plan B, often if there's an incumbent firm or a firm particularly specialized in this area, they should be really well equipped to provide a quantity. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if those quantities are correct or that they stand the test of time. The goal here is to get cost predictability at a unit price level. So once you've quantified them, with that information, the firm has enough historical pricing data, they have enough experience to know what it should cost them to perform the service, knowing what those quantified key cost driving activities are. They can give you then a fixed fee for the phase, and then they can break out that fixed fee by the key cost driving activities. Then what we say to the firms is, we're going to give you the opportunity to come back to us and tell us if the price needs to change from your original proposal, but only if those quantities that we set out at the start have changed, and only if they've changed significantly. So if I said you're going to need to review 5,000 documents and there ended up being 5,100 documents, not material enough a change. We need cost predictability. So I don't want you coming back to me every time there's 100 extra documents. But if it ended up being 10,000 documents, well, that's something else. That does warrant a change in price. So what we say is, unless there's a 30% increase or decrease in the assumed quantity of these cost driving activities, then the price remains the same. But if that material deviation is triggered, then you can come back to us and say, we need to increase our bill, but we know exactly how much you should increase it by, because you already told me what it's going to cost you to review 5,000 documents. So all I'm going to do is double that fee. So of course, there's always going to be an element of good faith in there. It's always going to be a little bit of a negotiation because it's a partnership with your firms. But this is the model that helps you address those changes in scope. I'm seeing a lot of questions come in. I'm just going to check them in case they're challenging what I'm saying. Okay. Yeah, these are good questions, but not hopefully not too many people challenging this model. Oh, there is a question. Did you say you would decrease the price if the actual? Yes. So this works in your favor as well. So let's use the document example again. If there ended up only being 1,000 documents for whatever reason, then that's again a 30% decrease in the assumed quantities, and you should be changing the price in my favor. You should be reducing the price accordingly as well. So it works for both parties. So you don't need to worry that you've overstated the assumptions when you went into the engagement. Just as long as they're likely, it's just a game of minimizing the number of times you need to have this conversation. But if you were way off and both parties were way off, then you do have the tools and the framework to have this discussion and make it fair for both parties. And so next slide, Maui, I might just read a couple of questions here because
yeah, of course,
because this is relevant. So there was a question here from Richard. I think AFAs are fine as an option only if you know that you're getting a better deal versus the hourly rate. how do you know and ensure that you're getting a better deal using an AFA or a value-based billing arrangement versus the hourly rate? So the question is, how do you know if you're getting a good AFA? And then there was another question here also relevant that said, do you still receive invoices with line item narratives and time spent? So do you still receive timesheets from your firms, or is that a practice abandoned? So Maui, why don't you start with how do you know if you're getting a good AFA?
Yeah, of course. So you really need to look at AFAs outside of the silo individual context. So the best AFAs are market-driven AFAs. So similar to the things that occur within the PERSUIT platform, you want to get an idea of what the market is defining in terms of value for this amount of work. Right. So a competitive bid, a competitive RFP process or RFI process where you're reaching out to the firms that have the expertise, your partner firms out there, you're making them compare their work at an apples to apples level using these AFA tools. So for example, here, a fixed fee at a phase or activity level, you can look across your firms and understand, hey, what does it actually take for these firms to do a motion for summary judgment? What are they defining that from a value proposition? And with something like this, you know you're getting the value of your AFA and you know you're getting that market value for an AFA because you see across the variance that each of these firms are giving you. So you kind of arrive at a market price. You get an understanding of a market price outside of just the hourly level. So this 295,000, for example, at Buy and Buy and Calmus and Calma, and the 255 at Calmus and Calmus, and then the third dollar value, you're not just seeing, hourly rates. You're actually seeing strategy in there almost, because that is internally as a law firm, when we provide that number, we're taking into consideration capacities. We're taking into consideration who is working, at what leverage are they working at going to be. We're talking to our partners when we structure fees like this and respond to clients about, hey, what is your strategy? What are your thought processes behind this? What amount of work are you actually giving? So firms are not just throwing numbers out there. When they provide these numbers, there really is deep thought and consideration, and that's kind of a byproduct of making them do a fixed fee, right? You're making the firms think about what they're actually going to have to do and the work and amount that it's going to have to take to get that value for you for that work product, because you're putting them into that AFA structure. And so this is a really good way to know and understand that you're getting that value from an AFA. And then I'm going to touch a little bit on this too, and I'm sure Laura will also, but the concept of, am I getting a better value for my AFA versus the hourly rates? So we really advocate for kind of a change in philosophy and understanding what that value is. Like, what are you actually willing to pay for a successful motion to dismiss? Does it matter if you went on an hourly basis, it's less, but you got that result, that you got that optimal, efficient, best result from your law firm, right? If we're just thinking about it from a unitized hourly basis and you're always tied to that, you're also incentivizing firms to tie themselves to that. And you're stepping away from outcomes and you're going back into effort. You're going back into law firms, just how much hours and how much time can they put into this, or how little time can they put into this to get me to point A, instead of what is the best way and what is the most efficient way to get to point A, or to get to that result that we're driving towards, and what is that value for me as a client, and what is that, what are the firms willing to provide that value for? So that's kind of the understanding that we're driving towards, and not so much, how much work do I have to put into this to get to that point A.
Yeah, it's a good point, Maui. And I think it always comes back to the only true way to know if you're getting a good AFA is to do a transparent, competitive RFP process. So enter PERSUIT, that's what we do. So if you're going out to firms you already have a relationship with, so most of you will have panel firms for your big areas of spend. So if you go out to your 3 or 4 preferred firms on a matter by matter basis, you provide them with the scope of work and you ask for an alternative fee arrangement. those proposals will usually come back apples to apples. That's one of the benefits of an AFA, is that you're really comparing price based on the exact same scope of work. So you get a really clear picture, as you can see in this example, of how these firms are pricing their work and what the market tells you it should cost. So to add an additional element on that is the transparency process. So we have a real-time bidding functionality where once these proposals come in, we can actually open up that transparency so the firms can see not who they're bidding against, but they can see the prices of their peer firms. So they can say, this third ranked firm here, they can say, well, the second and first ranked firm had the exact same information as me. They got the same quantified assumptions, and they've billed it pretty close to each other. They've proposed an AFA that's pretty close. So where am I wrong? And because I can see that price transparency at the phase level and often at the key cost driving activity level, then I have one more opportunity to align myself with my peer firms. And if I really want to win the work, I may have room on this particular matter to be even more competitive. If it's a firm I haven't done a lot of work in this area before and I want to get my foot in the door, maybe I've got extra capacity, I've got lawyers sitting on the bench, and I can afford to make a loss on this so I can really flex my expertise and my capabilities as a firm. So the best way to determine if you're getting a good AFA is by a competitive market-driven RFP process with an element of transparency. And then the other question was probably about shadow billing. So are you still getting timesheets? Is a good idea to get shadow bills with your itemized task invoices for fixed fees? The answer is no. Well, it's not a practice that we recommend. The reason being that when your firms are providing you with a fixed fee or an alternative fee arrangement, it allows them to better leverage their staffing model. So they can have paralegals and junior lawyers do more of that lower level work without worrying that they need to have partners billing that time. So with a better staffing model leveraged, once they do that, then they can actually still make a profit on the alternative fee arrangement. And so if they provide you with a shadow bill after they've already changed the staffing mix or had a better leverage staffing model, then it's always going to look like you would have got a better hourly rate, a better bill if you'd used an hourly rate, because they've already leveraged that staffing model. Also, it just doesn't incentivize them to truly back the AFA model. If you're still asking them to provide timesheets and track their time, then it defeats the purpose of an AFA. And then the follow-up question from that is always, well, if they're going to give more of the work to junior staff members, then I'm going to lose quality. Quality is always table stakes. Your firms, if they're true partners, will always provide you with high quality outcomes. And so if they don't, then that's a question about whether or not you should continue to work with that firm. But most of the time, I'm sure you'd agree, Maui, from your time at Latham, that the firms will never skimp on quality to make up a loss in profitability.
Definitely. I definitely agree with that. And then in terms of just the shadow billing and the efficiencies themselves, again, we're trying to drive the point that you want, and the most successful AFA arrangements with law firms are with law firms that are your trusted partners, that you're really working closely with, and you're understanding and valuing the work that they're providing for you as a client. And then having that shadow bill also, I mean, there's just a lot of different things that happen there. One of the downsides that we talked about on hourly billing is kind of invoice review and looking at and questioning line by line what happens with firms. And you kind of revert back to that when you go towards shadow billing. So instead of just looking at and comparing like, hey, did I get a good result from this? Was it worth the price that I paid? You're kind of drilling back down and saying like, okay, but why did they staff it with this and why did they staff it with that? You're removing a little bit of the flexibility and putting a little bit more onus and risk on your firms, beyond what they normally would take on for these RFP arrangements.
Thanks, Maui. I might just jump in there and address some of these questions quickly, and perhaps in the follow-up email after, we might provide some more information on the questions that I don't get to here. But I might just quickly address, so someone said a 30% change in the number of motions is different to a 30% change in the number of documents. Do you do it by topic? So usually no. So usually with the number of motions, yes, obviously it's different if there's 5 more of those than when you're talking about 5,000 documents, but it's a 30% change on the original assumption. So if you originally only assumed 1 motion and there ends up being 2, then that's more than a 30% change. So that does trigger a material deviation, and then you go back. So it still would work the same. It just goes off the original number. That's not to say that you couldn't do it by topic. And sometimes it does make sense to change it to 10% or 20%, especially if you apply that process to a matter level fixed fee. There's a question here about diversity. Yes, PERSUIT does have a module in it that allows you to ask the firm questions about how they intend to staff the matter with respect to diversity. So yes, you can ask your firms, and most of our clients do, ask them about the percentage of work being performed by diverse lawyers, the origination credit, is that going to diverse lawyers? Is the lead lawyer diverse? There's another question here about, are there any other terms for AFAs catching on? I've heard lots of clients call them different things. Let me think off the top of my head. Alternative fee arrangements, innovative fee arrangements,
non-hourly billing.
Yeah, lots of different terms, but AFA is the one we've heard the most. And one question I just wanted you to answer, Maui, is if a firm is taking on some AFAs and some hourly rates, does it lead to an incentive to prioritize clients who are paying hourly, leading to a lower level of priority for clients on AFAs, which could lead to slower turnarounds?
Got it. Yeah, no, again, touching back to what Laura said, quality is standard for these firms. They don't want to give an impression of that happening to any of their clients, because that is just their reputation out in the market. So if you start hearing that from, oh, hey, Latham and Watkins, whenever they do an AFA arrangement, they don't respond to your calls as quickly, that's going to impact the larger book of business just outside that AFA body itself. And also, the more sophisticated, the more larger firms, they are embracing, just giving you an insider perspective a little bit, we are embracing AFAs. We're not shying away from it or going, kind of being afraid of the implications of what AFAs are bringing. We're seeing it as an aspect of the market, and we're seeing it as something that is, a response to year-over-year increases in rates. We understand what the clients are going through and seeing when they get those emails at the beginning of the year saying, hey, rates are going up 5%, associate progression is also going to be happening in there. So because we understand that, we know that AFA is a very natural, organic response to what that's going to be. So it's just becoming part of the pricing strategy at a lot of these large law firms, where it doesn't get seen as something other or different in terms of the work product and the quality that you're providing when you're structuring something on an AFA and an hourly basis.
Yeah. Thanks, Maui. So we could talk about this all day, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Again, this is part of a series. We do have a number of other AFA sessions coming up where we'll do a deeper dive on some of these topics. So if you're interested about the CLE program, once you jump off, you'll be asked to respond to a survey. So you just need to complete that survey if you want to know more about how to get CLE credits for this webinar or the future ones. So thanks, Maui. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me, Laura.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.